The objective of this lesson is to use ratio reasoning to determine a percent of a whole. The focus of this lesson will be to make generalizations from patterns to solve percent problems and evaluate the reasonableness of answers efficiently. We will be finding the part given, the percent, and the whole. In previous lessons, students started with a ratio compared to a number less than 100, then made an equivalent ratio out of 100. For example, an equivalent ratio to 25 over 50 is 50 over 100. In this lesson, we will start with a ratio with the denominator of 100, then make an equivalent ratio with the denominator less than 100. Let's begin by reviewing that a percent is a number out of 100. For example, 40 colored squares on a hundredths grid represents the ratio 40 to 100, or 40%. What if we wanted to show 40% of 50? We can partition the hundreds chart in half, which shows 50 squares on each side. Notice that there are 20 squares out of the 50 shaded in. This illustrates that the ratio 40 to 100 is equivalent to 20 to 50, so 40% of 50 is 20. Another strategy to show that 40% of 50 is 20 is by using a table. The table is labeled percent and value. 100% of 50 is 50. Dividing both numbers by 2, 50% of 50 is 25. Dividing both of those numbers by 5, 10% of 50 is 5. We can use subtraction at this point. 50% minus 10% is 40%, and the value shows that 25 minus 5 is 20. Again, 40% of 50 is 20. Let's try another strategy using a double number line. Starting with 100% is 50. 50% is easily determined and recorded on a double number line. The space between 0% and 50% is partitioned into 5 spaces in order to locate and label 40%. The percent labels are in increments of 10. 50% divided by 5 equals 10%. Because 50% was divided by 5, 25 is also divided by 5 to determine that the bottom of the number line is labeled in increments of 5. 25 divided by 5 equals 5. 20% of 50 equals 10, 30% of 50 equals 15, and 40% of 50 equals 20. Another strategy is using money as a context for thinking about 40% of 50. We know that 10% of $1 is 10 cents, and 10% of $50 is $5. 40% of 50 is 4 groups of 5. 4 times 5 equals 20, so 40% of 50 is 20. Any of the other strategies that were presented can also find the answer to what is 40% of 25. Let's try another problem. What if we had the question, what is 40% of 45? Some percent problems are easily solved using hundredths grid, while other problems are more easily solved using another method. For example, how about using a table? We can determine 100% of the whole is 45. Then we can find a common factor of both numbers. Both numbers can be divided by 5, so let's try that. 100% divided by 5 is 20%, and 45 divided by 5 is 9. 20% plus 20% equals 40%, and 9 plus 9 equals 18. So 40% of 45 is 18. The objective for this lesson was to use ratio reasoning to determine a percent of a whole. We met this objective by reasoning to make generalizations from patterns to solve percent problems and evaluate the reasonableness of our answers. We built a conceptual foundation for what it means to determine a percent of a quantity by shading in hundredths grids in order to see patterns of equivalent ratios. We also used ratio tables, equivalent ratios, and double number lines.